and bid'ah, and every bid'ah is misguidance, and every misguidance leads to the hellfire. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran in a very simple, straightforward statement that is addressed to each and every one of us. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. Indeed, the believers are brothers to one another. They are brothers to one another. And you can take this word so far that it constitutes within itself a way of life. And I don't think there's anyone who believes in Allah and His Messenger who disagrees with this fact, or who at least mentally and apparently objects to this, that the believers are brothers to one another, that they are considered to be ikhwah. The bond between them is unusual, is so powerful, is so stable and profound, because what combines them is the bond of faith, the bond of belief. Because before we are considered to be bodies, before we are considered to be physical form, we are essentially spiritual creatures. Because when the soul leaves the body decays and decomposes and turns back into dust. So the reality of who we are is our souls. And the blood brotherhood that we have is based on this physical relationship, the physical aspect of who we are. But the bond of brotherhood that we have in Islam is a spiritual one. So it has to do more with our essence, our spiritual essence. This is why it transcends this world. It transcends the boundaries of space and time, because it's our hearts that bond. And the bond and the connection between these hearts is the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most powerful force that runs the creation. And that's what we call in Islam worship and ibadah, because it's the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that bonds our hearts together. This is why it's more powerful than any other relationship. And we all seem to agree on this in theory. We actually profess that. We preach that. We talk about this. And we brag about it. But the real test of this word is that, is this a reality in our lives? Are we living up to this word? Up to this instruction? Are we making it a manifest way of life? Does it show in the way we treat each other? Does it show in the way that we think of one another? Does it show in the way in our demeanor towards one another? Does it show? Or do we see quite the opposite? The Prophet ﷺ, in a hadith that is collected by Muslim, reported by Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, explains this verse. The Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith, it's a longer hadith and part of it is وَلَا تَحَاسَدُوا. O you who believe, the believers, he's addressing the believers. وَلَا تَحَاسَدُوا. Do not have envy to one another. Do not envy one another. Don't be jealous of one another. وَلَا تَنَاجَشُوا. And do not argue and quarrel with one another. Don't have arguments with one another. وَلَا تَبَاغَضُوا. And do not have hatred to one another. Do not have hatred to one another. وَلَا تَدَابَرُوا. And do not bring about dissension and enmity among yourselves. وَلَا يَبِعْ بَعْضُكُمْ عَلَى بَيْعِ بَعْضٍ. And when one of you does some kind of business with another, don't interfere, don't interject, trying to spoil it and take over that transaction. Because sometimes there is competition. We live in this real world. وَلَا يَبِعْ بَعْضُكُمْ عَلَى بَيْعِ بَعْضٍ. When a brother does a transaction or a business, do not interject to spoil it. Do not interject to destroy it or take it over. وَكُونُوا عِبَادَ اللَّهِ إِخْوَانًا, and be the servants of Allah, brothers to one another. So the Prophet ﷺ in this particular statement is making clear that the bond between us is that we are worshippers of Allah alone. That we worship Allah alone, and that's the basis and the foundation of our brotherhood. وَكُونُوا عِبَادَ اللَّهِ إِخْوَانًا, be the servants of Allah, be the slaves of Allah, be the worshippers of Allah, brothers to one another. Al-Muslimu akhul Muslim. The Muslim is the brother of his fellow Muslim. They are brothers. La yadlimuhu. He never brings injustice on his brother. And injustice includes, and it has so many forms. It could be physical injustice. It could be emotional injustice. It could be social injustice. It could be economic injustice. And there are so many other forms of injustice that we could inflict on one another. Just by the fact that I have su'u dhann of another Muslim. I see a Muslim brother doing something and I interpret it in a negative way when there are other possible interpretations. This is an act of injustice. This evil suspicion, this inappropriate conclusion in my head, as long as I have it in my head and I entertain it, this is an act of injustice. And there are others. How often we disrespect one another. How often we slander one another. How often we backbite one another. How often we disrespect one another. How often we deny our brothers and our sisters their rights. And that's oppression and injustice. La yadlimuhu. The believer or the Muslim does not do injustice to his Muslim brother. Wala yakhdhiluhu. And he never lets him down. A Muslim never lets a Muslim down. You never let him down. You never disappoint him. وَلَا يَكْذِبُهُ or وَلَا يُكْذِبُهُ. And he never lies to him. He never lies to him. Or another wording, another way to look at the word, and he never disbelieves in him. He never accuses him in his truthfulness and honesty. وَلَا يَحْقِرُهُ. And he never contemptuously, or he never treats him contemptuously or with contempt. He never disrespects him. That's what the Prophet ﷺ is saying about Muslims. Then the Prophet ﷺ is saying, At-taqwa ha-huna. And he puts his hand on his chest, on his heart, 3 times. At-taqwa ha-huna. At-taqwa ha-huna. At-taqwa ha-huna. بحسب امرئ من الشر أن يحقر أخاه المسلم. That's a profound, powerful statement. The Prophet ﷺ says, it is enough evil in a person, in a Muslim, to disrespect another Muslim. The worst evil you could ever reach as a Muslim is to heap contempt on another Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ is saying that's the most evil that you could harbor as a human being. بِحَسْبِ امْرِئٍ مِّنَ الشَّرِّ. It's enough evil in a person that he has contempt to another Muslim. بِحَسْبِ امْرِئٍ مِّنَ الشَّرِّ أَنْ يَحْقِرَ أَخَاهُ الْمُسْلِمِ كُلُّ الْمُسْلِمِ عَلَى الْمُسْلِمِ حَرَامٌ. All of the Muslim, everything in a Muslim is sanctified and protected in Islam when it comes to his relationship with another Muslim. So, دَمُهُ وَمَالُهُ وَعِرْضُهُ. Everything in him is protected and is sanctified in Islam. His blood, that means you cannot cause harm to him. From the smallest harm you could ever think of, to the worst harm that is shedding his blood. وَمَالُهُ. His wealth, his money, his business, his possessions, وَعِرْضُهُ, and his dignity and sense of honor. All of these are sanctified in Islam. You cannot violate them. They're not open to you to violate. You don't have a choice there. You cannot violate any of these three in a Muslim. Their blood, their life, and their physical well-being, their economic well-being and their wealth, their possessions, and their dignity, their self-esteem, their respect. It's not up to you. It's not a matter of discretion. You can't make choices there. You have to give them their right, their dignity. You cannot violate that under any circumstances. You cannot. That's how the Prophet ﷺ summarizes the relationship between Muslims. That's how it should be. Just living for a few moments in the guidance of this hadith, then reflecting on the state of our Muslims, we can see the disparity. We can see the discrepancy, we can see the gap, and how much work we still have to do. And it's not about preaching here. It's about holding oneself accountable when it comes to the guidance of this hadith. So what I recommend is look up this hadith. It's quite easy. It's in Sahih Muslim, narrated by Abu Hurairah. It's about brotherhood in Islam. If you just look it up, you will find it. Read it a few times. If you can get access to a commentary on this hadith, read what the scholars say about this hadith. Then take some time, a couple of weeks, to try to implement this hadith in yourself, in your life, in your relationships. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses the believers in the Quran. He says, وَلَا تَنَازَعُوا فَتَفْشَلُوا وَتَذْهَبَ رِيحُكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, and do not dispute, do not have disagreement with one another, do not have this enmity amongst yourselves, so you become divided. And then your wind will be blown away, your power will be blown away. You'll be weak. You'll be weak. And when we look at our own states, and none of us is free from that. None of us is free from that. We have our own bias. We have our own prejudice. We have our own grudges and our own issues against others. And sometimes we live in denial to that. So we're not consciously aware that I have issues against some Muslims, that I have some hatred against some Muslims. That is not justified by any means. It's just a personal choice. It's just a personal preference. And it violates this hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So let's go again over the hadith and try to see how we can implement it. وَلَا تَحَاسَدُوا. Do not have envy to one another. So when you see a brother that Allah has gifted him with something, blessed him with something, or you see a sister that Allah has blessed her with something, never wish that Allah takes it away, but wish them well. Say Alhamdulillah that Allah has blessed someone with something like this. Feel good for them. Feel good for them, and it will help you feel good as well. Because we humans, when we are good to others, it makes us feel good about ourselves as well. Because everything that is good heals our hearts, heals our souls, and we can feel it. So every time you find yourself having some negative feelings when you see Allah has blessed someone with something, say, that's it. That's it. I have this issue in me. I have this disease in me. I need to treat it. Let me see how I can deal with that. Let me wish well for that person. And let me see the gifts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how Allah knows where to put His blessings. And reflect on that. You'll start to heal yourself from this. Every time, catch yourself having envy or jealousy towards someone. And usually envy and jealousy shows when someone has something, you try to put them down. You try to undermine what they have or what they do. Or when they make a mistake, you're happy. Why? Because there's an opportunity to put them down. That's a sign of jealousy. It is. And sometimes we mask it with good things. With good things. I told you this brother has some serious issues and now he's fallen. Now you can see that I knew what he was about. We think, okay, there's a good way to put it. But if you dig deep down, if you're honest enough with yourself, most likely you will find jealousy and envy there. وَلَا تَنَاجَشُوا, and do not have arguments with one another. The Prophet ﷺ says in a hadith, أَنَا زَعِيمٌ لِبَيْتٍ بِرَبَضِ الْجَنَّةِ أو بِوَسَطِ الْجَنَّةِ لِمَنْ تَرَكَ الْمِرَاءَ وَإِنْ كَانَ مُحِقًّا. The Prophet ﷺ says, I'm the master of a house in the highest place in paradise, the highest spot in paradise, for everyone who walks away from arguments, who backs off from arguments, even if he's upon the truth. He doesn't want to argue. He doesn't want to argue. And the Prophet ﷺ in many hadith, he put down the issue of argumentativeness, having this tendency to have argumentations and have debates. Some people find so much joy with that. And some of the early Muslim scholars, they said, مَا ضَلَّ قَوْمٌ إِلَّا بَعْدَ أَنْ أُوتُوا الْجَدَلِ. People don't usually go misguided until they have amongst themselves this tendency to have arguments and debates, this argumentative nature. So much argument and questions and a lot of critical thinking and back and forth with all of these things. Critical thinking is, by the way, has its place and is good. I'm not putting it down. But just I'm saying being argumentative, that's a very negative trait. And it doesn't lead people to the truth. وَلَا تَبَاغَضُوا. Do not have hatred to one another as Muslims. How often someone disagrees with us, someone says something we don't like, they say something we don't like, something we disagree with, straight away we take a personal stance against them. We start to have hatred towards them. We start to have issues against them. The companions of the Prophet ﷺ had differences about certain issues, but they never had any problem. Imam al-Shafi'i radiyallahu anhu, he had some kind of a discussion or a dialogue with Ishaq ibn Rahawayh, one of the great scholars of his time. When they disagreed about this matter, then al-Shafi'i holds his hand and he walks with him and he says, حَتَّى لَوْ اخْتَلَفْنَا أَلَا يَسَعُنَا أَن نَكُونَ إِخْوَانًا. Even if we differ, can't we be brothers to one another? We can. We can. That's how al-Shafi'i treated his fellow scholar, his fellow Muslim. We disagree, but we don't lose our brotherhood. وَلَا تَدَابَرُوا. Do not turn your backs to one another. In the sense, don't have enmity towards one another. Do not create this dissension and split among yourselves, with your brothers. There are issues. Life is life. There are problems. There are disagreements. There are arguments. There are stark differences amongst ourselves, yes. But it doesn't mean we lose our brotherhood. It doesn't mean we compromise on one of the most precious gifts Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. So we should keep these things, at least in our personal life. I could disagree with your spouse. When you disagree with your spouse, don't compromise that relationship. If you sometimes don't see eye to eye with your son or with your daughter or with your brother, do not compromise on the relationship. Do not destroy it. These are things we just need to pay attention to. And they're not very difficult to implement, especially if we implement them for some time. They start to be easier and easier. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So the Prophet ﷺ says, وَلَا يَبِعْ بَعْضُكُمْ عَلَى بَيْعِ بَعْضٍ. When a brother has a transaction, he has a business, do not come and spoil it for them. Do not try to overtake it. The Prophet ﷺ is taking it to more practical grounds. That's business, that's trade. Do not spoil the business of one another. Do not interfere in that. Because that, again, this is a manifestation of jealousy, a manifestation of hatred, a manifestation of selfishness. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying, don't do that, because that compromises the brotherhood. It violates it in the first place. وَكُونُوا عِبَادَ اللَّهِ إِخْوَانًا. Be the servants of Allah. Be the slaves of Allah, and that brings you as brothers together. That's how we should be. The Prophet is giving a description of how Muslims should be. Servants of Allah who are brothers to one another. That's how we are supposed to live our lives. So whatever we have, we should not compromise on this brotherhood, on this relationship. And don't forget, it's not a matter of discretion. You don't have choice about this. Oh, I don't feel like doing it. If you subscribe to Islam, that's a divine instruction. It's a divine instruction. You don't have choice. And if faith is there, it is supposed to translate in brotherhood. Because if both of us love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and believe in the oneness of Allah and we worship Allah alone, this creates a very powerful bond between us. Because our hearts meet. So if I have hatred to someone who has love of Allah in his heart, there's something there. Something there that his love of Allah does not bring me close to him. That means I have other priorities probably. Al-Muslimu akhul Muslim la yadhlimuhu. The Muslim is the brother to his fellow Muslim. He doesn't oppress. He doesn't do injustice. He doesn't let him down. And he does not disbelieve in him, or he does not lie to him, and he does not disrespect him or treat him with contempt. And these are big problems that we have. Sometimes, as I said, we have issues, we have disagreements, and then the last thing on our minds is the brotherhood. It's all about me, being on the right. It's all about me getting my right. It's all about me proving I'm right. And we compromise, sometimes just having a discussion. I'm so adamant to be right and prove myself right, even if it means disrespecting the other person or putting them down. For what? Just to be right? What did you gain? What did you get? That's ego. That's a nafs. And shaitan blows into it. That's the evil side of our desires. So we should not compromise on our brotherhood. When it comes to all, because in life there's a lot of disagreements, there is a lot of issues, there's always things. And we should never compromise on the brotherhood despite our differences and our issues. Then the Prophet ﷺ says, it's enough evil in a Muslim to have contempt and disrespect to one another. Look at the wordings here. It's enough evil. You can't get worse than that. Than disrespecting and having contempt towards your fellow Muslim. And how common is this among Muslims? Just if I disagree with you in something, I compromise on your dignity. I speak to you with disrespect, right? I speak to you, I put you down. I feel that I have the right to violate everything about you because I see what you are upon is wrong. Straight away, automatically. I disagree with you about sometimes minor issues. Then I feel myself entitled to put you down and violate every right you have. Why? Because I'm on the right, you're on the wrong. I'm on the truth, and you're against the truth. And how often we cover this up? We sugarcoat it with what? Oh, it's about the truth, it's about the religion. And usually who does this? People who have little knowledge. Yes, there are people who lie against Islam. There are people who distort Islam. There are people who change Islam. The scholars and the students of knowledge know how to handle this. But it's when people with little knowledge try to become scholars, put themselves in a position where they know what's right and what's wrong, when they still have a long way to go to learn. So this is just a simple advice from the Quran, from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and I think we need it most these days. We need it most because we are very well divided, even on an individual basis. Very well. It's beautiful when if you walk into a masjid and you feel the love that Muslims have for one another. But you really miss it these days. You really miss it. Oftentimes you go into a masjid, you feel judged, you feel criticized, you feel you're being watched, you're being critiqued. Instead of feeling welcome, feeling the genuine love. Why? Because you came to the house of Allah. And the reason that brought us here is the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So part of this brotherhood as well as all of you know, with the events that happened in Mogadishu in Somalia, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept the ones who died in this incident as martyrs and shuhada, and to give their families patience and forbearance, And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to heal the ones who are injured and everyone that is affected. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect the Muslims everywhere from all of these atrocities and these crimes that sometimes could be done in the name of Islam, when Islam is free from all of this. But it shows as well that we need to when there are people that are sowing hatred in the world, Islam is teaching us to bring about love and connection and brotherhood. And that's why we need it more than any other time probably. We need it more than other time. We need to make it manifest. We need to make it a way of life. We need it to be so visible and so powerful that it overcomes the forces of evil that bring about hatred and enmity in this world. So inshallah, as you know, the masjid will be collecting funds. They won't be collecting as you leave, but anyone who wants to make these donations, either go to the head office in the masjid or do that online on the website. And I encourage you to do that. And inshallah, you know that the sadaqah is rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially when people are in dire need of it. جزاكم الله خيرا. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وإسرافنا في أمرنا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. اللهم كن للمستضعفين من المؤمنين في كل مكان. اللهم احقن دماءهم. اللهم صن أعراضهم. اللهم احفظ عليهم دينهم وإيمانهم. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على عبدك ورسولك محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن سار على هديه إلى يوم الدين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.